In this video, we're going to take a look at the Equator network as a resource that you may be able to use as you develop your capstone project. So Equator stands for Enhancing the Quality and Transparency of Health Research. And this website here has basically a lot of reporting guidelines for different types of research and scholarship. So we're going to look at a few that may be most applicable to capstone work. And certainly if there's things that I don't cover in this video that are more applicable to your situation, happy to meet individually with folks and talk through how this may be helpful. So why are reporting guidelines useful for capstone? Certainly, if you are thinking about publishing your work down the road or presenting it in a more kind of professional format, these guidelines may actually be requested of you by a journal or some sort of organization that you're working with. But even if that's not kind of the direction you're going with your capstone, certainly they can still be really useful. And one of the main reasons they can be really useful is they provide often like a checklist or some sort of guidelines for like what kind of information should you be collecting as you implement your capstone project, or even what should you be thinking about as you're planning kind of to implement your capstone project. So just to look at, this is the home page here that you're seeing, and you can see here that they have a list of some of the more, I guess, common study types, randomized trials, observational studies, that sort of thing. You can also see here that there are 507 reporting guidelines. So that's a lot. Some of them are extremely specific to specific disciplines or very specific types of research. Others are a little more general. So certainly there's a very broad list if you wanted to look through that. And there's other resources too. There's toolkits that talk about scholarly publishing and other kind of research topics. But again, we're going to focus here on some of the reporting guidelines. So as you can see, there's links to the different websites or articles that house these guidelines. And I've already opened up a few of them here. So we're going to look at this one here, which is the for clinical practice guidelines, okay, the agree reporting checklist. So if we look here, right, you can see that it breaks it down in different sections. And again, different information that may be very valuable for you to think about and to help you organize and structure your capstone project. I will say that for all of these checklists, there may be things that aren't applicable to your capstone. Or, again, your capstone is a very, in the grand scheme of research things, a pretty short time period and small, somewhat small type of project. So you may not get to some of these other elements, and that's totally fine. But I think, again, these checklists can be really helpful to have a discussion with potentially your site if they're very involved in your project, and certainly your faculty advisor to discuss what is the information that you want to be collecting. And again, thinking about how you're going to report that out as part of your poster and your poster presentation. So again, this is for clinical practice guidelines, if that's what you're working on developing. So talking about the scope and purpose of your guidelines. If you had any stakeholder involvement, again, that may have not been feasible in your capstone, but certainly something good to think about, right? And how did you develop your practice guidelines? Moving down here to making sure that your recommendations are very clear and specific. And what I think is really a very important part of a capstone is the applicability, particularly applicability to occupational therapy, right? So it gives some really useful, I think, things to think about and things to, really consider including in your work. And again, some things like editorial independence may not be applicable to your project, but again, this can be really useful. So another one that may be useful is the CARE checklist, which is for case reports or case studies. So again, it goes through, you know, what kind of information about your client that you're collecting, what are some, you know, are there diagnostics or interventions, maybe particularly important, outcomes and discussion. So again, this can be a really useful kind of checklist and way to structure it. There's also the PRISMA guidelines, which are used for systematic reviews, meta-analyses, and what's most applicable to the Capstone scoping reviews, which I know some folks work on as their Capstone project. So again, it just breaks down what do you want to include in your scoping review. So again, I think this can be really helpful as you're planning as well as you're implementing and, you know, reporting out on your work. So, you know, considerations for, you know, the methods that you're using, the results and the discussion, that sort of thing. And the last one here is for qualitative research, Core Q. And so this article here provides 32 items for particularly use of interviews and focus groups. So if that is part of your capstone, you may want to take a look at this checklist and kind of see, you know, how you have kind of, you know, designed and implemented this, and are there some maybe things you can add or change or adjust to strengthen the quality of your work. So again, I hope that this is a useful tool for you as you're continuing to really get into your capstone project. And certainly if you have questions about this resource or any other resources and how it may apply to your individual situation, definitely reach out. Thanks a lot.